Imagine a country bigger than Pluto, larger than the entire African continent, a nation where the subway looks like a Baroque palace and costs less than a cup of coffee. Imagine a place where in winter you could freeze to death in 20 minutes, but in summer it hits 95 degrees. A land where women are considered among the most beautiful in the world, yet the marriage rate is plummeting dramatically. Welcome to Russia. From Kaliningrad to Vladivostok, it takes 7 days by train. 7 days, all within the same country. But Russia isn't what you think. It's not what Hollywood movies show. It's not what Western news reports tell you. It's something infinitely more complex, contradictory, and fascinating. On this journey, you'll discover the real Russia, the one where you pay 50 cents to cross a city on trains that arrive every 90 seconds, where tickets to the Bolshoi Theater cost less than a pizza, where apartments can cost less than a monthly salary, but where everyday life hides challenges that the West can't even imagine. If you want to see the real Russia, not the one shaped by media bias or Cold War stereotypes, hit like and subscribe, because what you're about to discover will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about the largest country on Earth. Let's get started right away. 15. Living where the cold can kill, but life never stops. Moscow, January, 7:30 in the morning. The temperature is minus 18 degrees, and the icy wind makes it feel like minus 28. Yet the streets are bustling with people. No one even seems to notice. At these temperatures, the air burns your lungs, exposed skin freezes in minutes, smartphones shut off on their own, batteries die, your eyelashes literally freeze. But the subway runs perfectly, buses arrive on time, and people go to work as if nothing's wrong. Here it is, the secret: insulation. Russian buildings are built like thermal fortresses, with double windows that are 3 or 4 centimeters thick. The central heating is so powerful that many people keep their windows open in the middle of winter because it's too hot inside. I'm from Italy, from Milan. With just minus 5 degrees, the city shuts down back home, but here, at minus 30. Life goes on as usual, but it's not always like this. In some regions of Siberia, the temperature drops to minus 50 degrees. At those levels, diesel fuel solidifies and cars won't even start. Schools only close when it gets colder than minus 55. And yet, cities like Yakutsk, with 300,000 inhabitants, exist and even thrive. How? Extreme adaptation. Everything is built on stilts raised above the permafrost. The water pipes run above ground, insulated. The doors are triple layered. Entrances have thermal airlock chambers. But then summer comes, and the transformation is mind-blowing. Even Moscow itself, which looks like a frozen tundra in winter, reaches 30 to 35 degrees in the summer. The parks burst with greenery, festivals fill the squares, and people swim in the river. The days last 17 to 18 hours of daylight. This extreme temperature swing, from minus 30 to plus 35, creates a unique national character. Russians never complain about the weather, never. Because they know you can't control the weather, you can only endure it. 14. The most beautiful subway in the world, for 50 cents a ride. I go down the escalators at Komsomolskaya station. I'm underground, 70 meters deep, lower than most skyscrapers are tall. And instead of concrete, gray, and neon lights, I see crystal chandeliers, frescoed ceilings, mosaics, gilded decorations, marble columns that look like they belong in Versailles. I'm not exaggerating. The Moscow metro is literally an underground palace. It was built under Stalin, in the 30s and 40s, in the midst of an era of repression, famine, and forced industrialization. Yet they decided to invest in beauty. Why? Propaganda. He had to demonstrate that socialism could create art for the people, not just for the rich, and they succeeded. Mayakovskaya Station has mosaics that represent 24 hours of Soviet life. Novoslobodskaya has stained glass windows that create hypnotic light effects. Ploshchad Revolyutsiya has 76 bronze statues representing workers, soldiers, athletes. More than 200 stations, 400 kilometers of tunnels. Some lines run under the river. The Moskva, others go so deep that during World War II they were used as bomb shelters. And the frequency? One train every 90 seconds during rush hour. 90 seconds. London and New York can only dream of this efficiency. The Moscow Metro carries over 9 million passengers a day, more than the entire population of Austria or Switzerland, every single day. And it always works, even at minus 30 degrees, even during the heaviest snowfalls. Never late, never stops. 13. Architecture that tells of centuries of madness and greatness. Red Square, Moscow. St. Basil's Cathedral looks at you with its colorful domes, as if it just stepped out of a psychedelic fairy tale. 9 chapels, each with a completely different design, impossible colors, shapes that defy geometry. Legend has it that Ivan the Terrible had the architect blinded after completing the work. That way, he would never be able to build anything more beautiful for anyone else. It's probably just a legend, but looking at that cathedral, you understand why such a story exists about. The Kremlin stretches for over 2 kilometers of fortified walls. Inside, there are Tsarist palaces, Orthodox cathedrals, modern government buildings, all enclosed within a medieval fortress that has stood for over 800 years. And then there's the stark contrast. Next to these historic structures, glass and steel skyscrapers rise up like futuristic giants. Moscow City, the financial district, has towers that soar over 300 meters. But even in ordinary residential neighborhoods, Soviet architecture has an unexpected grandeur. Communist-era buildings with decorated facades, elaborate balconies, and monumental entrances. Why? Still propaganda. Even public housing had to convey socialist greatness. The result? A city where 16th century cathedrals, palaces, Tsarist, monumental Stalinist architecture and ultra-modern skyscrapers coexist. All together, all visible from the same street. 12. The cost of living. Numbers that make no sense. Average salary in Moscow, 750 euros per month. In St. Petersburg, 530 euros. By Western standards, this looks like extreme poverty. But wait. Rent a decent apartment in Moscow. From 450 to 750 euros. A meal at the restaurant. From 7 to 14 euros. Weekly supermarket shopping. 28 euros. Unlimited subway travel for a month. 18 euros. Ticket to the Bolshoi Theatre. From 9 to 75 euros. The most famous opera theater in the world. Less than a dinner at an average Italian restaurant. The Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg. 9 euros for admission. It houses 3 million works of art. It would take years to see them all. So yes, salaries are low in absolute terms, but the purchasing power is completely different. The problem? This equation only works if you earn in rubles and spend in rubles. If you want to travel abroad, buy imported products, or save in a strong currency, it becomes impossible. And there's another detail that nobody talks about. To maintain this economic balance, Russians work like crazy. The 996 culture, working from 9 to 9, 6 days a week, isn't just a Chinese thing. It's standard here too. Many people have 2 jobs. Many work overtime without pay, because 750 euros covers basic expenses, but not vacations, not emergencies, not savings for the future. So is Russia cheap? Yes, if you're a tourist with euros. No. If you're a Russian citizen trying to build a stable life. 11. The Trans-Siberian. 9,289 kilometers of railway madness. Fly. Vladivostok. 9,289 kilometers. 7 days of travel. 11 time zones crossed. The Trans-Siberian is not just a train. It's an existential experience, a forced meditation, a journey through landscapes that change so slowly you lose all sense of time. The first hours you see birch forests, endless, identical, hypnotic. Then the Urals, the mountains that divide Europe and Asia. Geographically, when you cross the Urals, you leave Europe and enter Asia. Physically, nothing changes. Then Siberia, hours and hours of taiga, forests, so vast that some don't even have a name. Remote villages with 20 to 30 houses, train stations. In the middle of nowhere, where the train stops for 5 minutes and then moves on. And the people on board become a temporary community. You share tea, you share food, you share stories. Because for 7 days, that train is your home. The cost ranges from 450 to 1,800 euros depending on the class. Third class. Open bunks in shared carriages. Second class, compartments for 4 people. First class, private compartments with a shower. But the real value isn't the transportation, it's the experience. It's looking at the lake. Baikal, the deepest lake in the world, which holds 22% of the planet's fresh water, seen from the train window as you cross Siberia. 10. Lake Baikal, the purest place on Earth. Who chooses depth? 1,642 meters. Deeper than many mountains are tall, and the water is so pure that in some areas you can see up to 40 meters deep. 40 meters. You can look down and see the bottom as if you were looking through clear air. In winter, the lake freezes, but not in the usual way. The ice forms geometric, perfect structures, crystals as big as cars, methane bubbles trapped inside that create natural sculptures. Walking on frozen Baikal is a surreal experience. Beneath you, 1,600 meters of icy water. Above you, an endless sky. And all around, total silence. The lake is home to species that don't exist anywhere else on Earth. The Nerpa, a freshwater seal, a freshwater one. The Omo, an endemic fish. Over 1,700 unique species. But there's a problem. Lake Baikal is in danger. Industrial pollution and mass tourism, climate change. In 2024, for the first time in 60 years, some areas did not freeze over completely. An alarming sign. 9. The cultural paradox. Cold on the outside, warm on the inside. The stereotype. Russians are cold, distant, unfriendly. The reality is more complicated. The first interaction with a Russian seems to confirm the stereotype. No smiles, no small talk, strict formality. But there's a deep cultural reason for this. In Russia, smiling for no reason is considered fake, even stupid. If you smile at a stranger on the street, they'll think there's something wrong with you. Small talk like "How are you?" "Good, and you?" It's seen as Western hypocrisy. If you ask a Russian how they're doing, they expect you to really want to know, and they'll tell you. For 20 minutes. But once you get past this initial barrier, everything changes. I met a Russian family who invited me to dinner. They spent 5 hours telling me stories, traditions, and their views on life. They treated me like a member of the family. They wanted to know everything about me, my life, my experiences. Russian friendship isn't superficial. It's deep, loyal, and lasting. A Russian friend will help you even if it comes at a personal cost. But it takes time to become friends, months, sometimes years. And there's another cultural aspect that's shocking, the widespread intellectualism. In Russia, quoting Dostoevsky or Tolstoy in a normal conversation isn't pretentious. It's just normal. People discuss philosophy, history, and art as if it were a sport. Classical music concerts attract people of all ages, not just the elderly. Young people, 20 to 25 years old, willingly go to listen to Tchaikovsky. The literacy rate is 99.7%, one of the highest in the world. Education is deeply valued. Being ignorant is considered a social shame. 8. Hidden technology. Yandex is the Russian ecosystem. Everyone knows Google, but few know Yandex. Yet Yandex does everything Google does. And in Russia, it does it better. More accurate maps, cheaper taxis, faster food delivery, streaming services, music, cloud, storage, everything integrated into an ecosystem that works perfectly. Digital payments are everywhere. Even street vendors accept payments via cell phone. Banknotes are becoming obsolete. Internet infrastructure in the big cities is incredibly fast. Fiber optic is almost everywhere. And it costs a fraction of what you pay in Europe or America. The contrast is surreal. You use a cutting-edge app to call a taxi, which arrives in 3 minutes. It takes you through streets lined with 18th century buildings to arrive at an apartment in a Soviet-era building from 1960. 7. Russian women. Beauty, pressure, and harsh reality. Let's be clear. Russian women have an international reputation for their beauty. And it's not a stereotype. It's statistically documented. In international beauty contests, Russian women win disproportionately compared to their population. Russia has produced more international models than any other post-Soviet country, but there's a price to pay. The social pressure on Russian women is overwhelming. At 25, if you're not married, you start getting questions. At 30, you're considered late. At 35, you're basically seen as a failure, socially. And marriage doesn't bring happiness. The divorce rate in Russia? It's one of the highest in the world, 65%. More than half of marriages fail. Male alcoholism is an epidemic. Domestic violence is underestimated and rarely reported. Many women remain trapped in destructive relationships because they're financially dependent. And then there's the demographic gap. There are 11 million more women than men in Russia. Male life expectancy is 68 years, female is 78. This creates fierce competition. Women have to be impeccable, always. Perfect makeup, fashionable clothes, high heels even in the snow, not out of vanity, but out of necessity, because there are literally fewer men available. But many modern Russian women are rebelling. They choose careers, stay single, move abroad. The birth rate is plummeting. 6. The Golden Ring, medieval Russia that still lives on, northeast of Moscow, a series of ancient cities that form what they call the Golden Ring. Here, time has stood still. White Orthodox churches with golden domes, fortified monasteries, wooden streets, traditional Russian architecture unchanged for centuries. In Suzdal, with a population of 10,000, there are 200 architectural monuments. 200. In a city even, smaller than a neighborhood in Rome. These places preserve the spiritual and cultural roots of Russia. Before Peter the Great, before forced modernization, before communism, walking through these cities is like traveling back 500 years, except everyone has a smartphone and pays with contactless cards. 5. The healthcare system. Universal. But at what cost? Healthcare in Russia is free, universal, and guaranteed by the Constitution. On paper, that's how it works. You go to the hospital, you get treated, you don't pay. In reality, you go to the hospital, you wait, hours, maybe days. Public facilities are overcrowded, underfunded, and have outdated equipment. If you need immediate and high-quality care, you bill private. And here, the prices are interesting. A complex surgical procedure that would cost between 45,000 and 90,000 euros in the United States. In Russia, it's between 4,500 and 9,000 euros, a tenth of the price, same quality. That's why medical tourism is booming. Patients from Europe, Asia, and the Middle East come to Russia for surgeries, dental care, and cosmetic surgery. But what about the average Russian citizen? If they have money, private care. If they don't have money, public care and hope it's nothing serious. 4. Regional diversity. 190 ethnic groups, 35 official languages. Russia is not a monolith. It's a multi-ethnic empire held together by history, geography, and strength. Tatarstan, capital Kazan. Here, Islam and Orthodox Christianity coexist, with mosques and churches on the same street. Cuisine that blends Russian and Turkish flavors. Sochi on the Black Sea, subtropical climate, palm trees, beaches, completely different from the typical Russian image. Vladivostok in the Far East, closer to Tokyo and Seoul than to Moscow. The architecture, cuisine, and culture are influenced by Asia. And then there are the autonomous republics, Chechnya, Dagestan, Yakutia, each with its own language, culture, and traditions. Holding together this vastness has always been Russia's historical challenge. Tsars, communists, the modern government, they've all struggled with the same problem. 3. Entrepreneurship in Russia. Opportunities and bureaucratic nightmares. Starting a business in Russia can be incredibly profitable or a complete bureaucratic nightmare. The domestic market is huge, 145 million people. The workforce is highly educated, operating costs are low, but the bureaucracy is Kafkaesque. Permits, licenses, inspections, certifications. Every step requires paperwork, stamps, and waiting. And then there's corruption. Not official, not documented, but everywhere. But e-commerce is booming. Wildberries and Ozon are successfully competing with Amazon, which hasn't even seriously entered the Russian market. Tech startups are thriving, especially in software, gaming, and cybersecurity. 2. Nightlife and entertainment. Tradition and modernity. They coexist. Moscow at night is unrecognizable. Electronic clubs that rival those in Berlin and Amsterdam. Speakeasy bars hidden away. Fusion restaurants that blend Russian and international cuisine. Club entry ranges from 4 to 18 euros. A drink costs between 4 and 7 euros. But in the same city, the Bolshoi Theatre stages classic ballets with tickets starting at 9 euros. Concert halls feature Rachmaninoff and Shostakovich alongside modern indie bands. 1. The uncertain future. Youthful optimism versus demographic reality. Here we are at number 1, the biggest contradiction in Russia. Young Russians are optimistic, ambitious. They want to build startups, travel, and have global experiences. But the demographics are a disaster. Russia's population is shrinking, with more deaths than births every year, hundreds of thousands fewer people annually. By 2050, Russia could lose between 20 and 30 million inhabitants. The pension system is at risk of collapsing. The military is struggling to recruit. Rural areas are becoming depopulated. The government is trying incentives, bonuses for newborns, support for families, and repatriation programs. But so far, nothing is working. Russia is aging, and no one knows how to stop the decline. 17 million square kilometers, 11 time zones, 145 million people. Russia is the largest country in the world, but also one of the most misunderstood. It isn't the monolithic threat portrayed by Western media, nor is it the paradise described by state propaganda. It's something infinitely more complex. It's a country where a 50-cent subway ride takes you through underground palaces. Baroque ones, where the most famous opera theater in the world costs less than a pizza, where minus 30 degrees in winter is considered normal. But it's also a country with devastating demographic problems, systemic corruption, a growing gap between rich and poor, and an alcoholism crisis. And an uncertain future. Russia is neither hell nor paradise, it's simply Russia. Vast, contradictory, fascinating, and tragic all at the same time. And you? Which of these 15 truths surprised you the most? Did you think Russia was different? Write it in the comments. I want to know if these discoveries have changed your perception. Did this journey through authentic Russia open your eyes to a country you thought you knew, but actually didn't know at all? Like the video, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. See you at the next destination. And remember, every country is more complex than it seems.